Hi, welcome to Hello Live. I'm Pamela Hadfield, the co-founder of HelloMD, and I'm joined here today with Dr. Patricia Frye, our Chief Medical Officer, to talk about cannabis and weight management. There is evidence that cannabis can actually help with a slimmer waistline and also improve our gut microbiome. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Frye, and let's get straight into it.
All right, I'm here.
So maybe, why don't you start by telling our audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a certified cannabis specialist, and I started my my career in cannabis medicine right here at HelloMD.
As our very first doctor.
Yes, I was your first.
It's like a bobblehead dance.
Yeah, and it's been an amazing journey. And since starting here, I've gone on and opened my own practice in cannabis medicine. I've evaluated and managed thousands of patients. And last year I wrote a book.
That's fantastic. And tell us about this book, because it's all of that history, the many, many years that you've worked for HelloMD and your clinical practice that's allowed you to really be the wealth of knowledge that you are.
Well, the book is called The Medical Marijuana Guide, Cannabis and Your Health. Mm-hmm. And I always stumble on that title because I've sort of taken marijuana out of my vocabulary,
mm-hmm.
but
we call it cannabis.
That's
it's
right.
Cannabis.
That's the plant's name. So it talks about the history of cannabis as a medicine and about the legalization, why it was criminalized in the first place. And it talks about different clinical conditions, about the plant itself. There's a lot of information in there about the endocannabinoid system and how to help our systems function more efficiently. So I think it's a pretty good read.
It is a good read, and I have to do the boasting for you. I've read a lot of cannabis books, and obviously there's a lot of information online, but very few books go into the amount of depth that you do across multiple conditions.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's talk about weight management with cannabis. Are you ready for the questions?
I'm ready.
And you know I'm going to pepper this with some interesting facts as well.
All right.
Okay, and just to remind our audience, just know that if you have any questions about cannabis and weight management, please use our live chat, and one of our doctors will look at your question and then answer it. Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so the first question is, why is it so hard for some people to lose and or maintain a healthy body weight?
It's a big problem these days, and there are a number of factors. I think that the major problem in this country is the food quality. We have a lot of fast food, a lot of processed food, a lot of food with hidden calories, hidden fat, hidden sugar, and we just aren't realizing how many calories the body's taking in. And ultimately, when you push away all of the other influences, it's all about calories in versus calories burned. Mm-hmm. And people can eat very small quantities of food, but they are laden in these hidden calories. And not only that, the food industry now adds these so-called natural flavors, which are really enhancers that stimulate reward areas in the brain that promote overeating, that cause us to eat more. Our lifestyles are a lot more stressful. People suffer from things like anxiety and stress. These emotions influence how our bodies metabolize calories. We have access to a lot of simple sugars that it doesn't take much for those to be converted into fat. We do a lot of riding and driving and not as much walking.
Sitting.
Yes, a lot of sitting. So there are a number of factors as to why obesity is such a big problem in this country these days.
Well, that's interesting. And when you were talking about the sugar converting easily, it's also the fact that a lot of these high-calorie foods are not nutrient-dense as well. So it's empty calories.
That's correct. Even a lot of the produce, a lot of the food that's produced here is grown in depleted soils. The micronutrient levels are not what they used to be. You know, even the fresh vegetables that we eat are not the same fresh vegetables that our grandparents ate in terms of nutritional value.
Right. Well, let's just get it out of the way. So cannabis is no substitute for having a healthy diet.
No, it's not.
Okay. So are you ready for the first interesting fact?
I am.
Okay. Did you know quote, eat less and move more, end of quote, is not an effective way to think about weight loss. This type of thinking is like telling someone with depression to cheer up. To effectively lose weight, more calories need to be leaving fat cells than coming in, which basically goes to the point that you were just talking about with calories.
Yes, it's still, the bottom line is taking in fewer calories than what your body needs to burn is the only way that you're going to lose weight. But how those calories are manipulated is influenced by a number of factors. And two, you have to consider that people have hormonal changes and things that drive them to eat more than what they need. So it's not a simple, as my son would say, if you want to lose weight, just don't eat so much. It's more complicated than that.
Well, it looks like someone from the audience has a question. And it goes like this: we tend to associate being healthy with weight loss. Can you talk about why this isn't always true? Great question.
It is, because it's not always about the weight, it's more about body fat. People can have higher muscle mass and weigh more and be a lot healthier than even someone who weighs less but has more body fat.
That's BMI, right?
It is, and there's some issues with the BMI, but it's a good kind of a ballpark place to start when talking to patients. Things don't always fall into line 100% with BMI, but we have to use something to kind of gauge where people are. The increase in body fat can lead to problems with like cardiovascular illness, high cholesterol, diabetes, or insulin insensitivity, and actually weight. We're back to weight, it can increase pain. So for chronic pain patients, then body weight is an issue. But to overly focus on weight itself can actually be a problem for some people. We don't want our patients to be too thin or to be overly focused on their weight, but we just want to get them thinking about eating in a healthy way, moving, exercising, and being as fit as they can.
That's right. It's about body, mind, and spirit working together and supporting yourself as a whole unit, right?
That's right.
So I'm going to ask you another did you know fact. Are you ready for it?
I'm always ready.
I know. You know most of them, though.
Well, not everything.
Not everything, but almost all. So while the weight loss supplement industry is huge, most supplements do not make you actually lose weight, but rather work through the placebo effect. People believe the supplements are causing their weight loss and are consequently more conscious of diet and living a healthy lifestyle. That is fascinating.
And that's true for a lot of medicine. There's a huge placebo effect.
Well, there was a recent study, right, that said the placebo effect is far more powerful than we actually ever believed it to be.
That's true.
And audience, if you have any questions, please be sure to use the live chat and ask a question there, and one of our HelloMD doctors will answer. So back to questions for you. So how can cannabis help people lose weight? How does that work?
Well, we don't have a full understanding of how it works, but I have to say that a lot of the syndromes of like metabolic syndrome, which is obesity, hypercholesterolemia, and diabetes, hypertension, is thought to be from an overactive endocannabinoid system. And this is a system in our body that regulates all of the other systems to keep things in balance or homeostasis. And we know that the endocannabinoid system, one of its functions is to have people to eat. It's eat, sleep, relax, and forget. And so when we eat too much, there may be some influence from the endocannabinoid system. And we see that with THC. THC will stimulate the appetite, especially for fatty foods. So there's something to my old stereotypical, it's not going to make you sit around all day looking at cartoons and eating potato chips. And there was actually an animal study where they gave the rats THC, and don't you know that they went for the bowl of potato chips as opposed to their rat food. But
like I would too.
Yeah.
Go on.
But anyway, CBD, which is one of the cannabinoids in the plant, and a cannabinoid is just a compound that's only found in the cannabis plant, and there are probably 150 of these compounds. And CBD is one of them that is not intoxicating, and it has a lot of medical benefits. But we have discovered that one of the benefits is that it suppresses the appetite. And CBD is what it's a fancy word. It's called an allosteric antagonist to CB1 receptors. And those CB1 receptors are in the brain and influence how we respond to food, wanting food, appetite, and feeling satisfied. So CBD is an appetite suppressant. So we found that patients who were using CBD for some other reason found that they were losing weight, they didn't have as big an appetite. And we've also found that CBD influences glucose and fat metabolism. So we have diabetic patients whose blood sugars that had been difficult to control were starting to come down, which implies that their pancreas is working better, their sensitivity to insulin is improving, and it also influences fat metabolism, so that patients with high cholesterol found that their cholesterol levels were coming down. So this using CBD has been very helpful, and I've seen it in a number of patients who have lost weight over the course of 6 months to a year. And this doesn't mean that you can, eat
anything?
Exactly. You can't, go running to the French fries and the fried foods and all that stuff and take CBD and think that it's going to make a miraculous difference. But if you incorporate some healthier eating habits and try to move a little bit, and I don't mean super vigorous exercise, because that can actually have the opposite effect because it increases your appetite, but CBD can definitely help a lot of patients with weight management.
Well, it's interesting that you say all of this, because it's great to hear it from your mouth as a doctor, because when I started to take CBD for my migraines, one of the things that I noticed about a year later was that I was able to effortlessly keep off weight that had been sort of on me for quite some time, like 5 or 10 pounds, and it didn't seem to stay with me in the same way that it had before I had been taking CBD. So
chances are you were metabolizing those calories more efficiently, and you probably weren't eating as much.
I think that might have been it too. So I'm going to give you another interesting fact. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so did you know approaching weight loss with a dieting mindset tends to mean you will gain back the weight eventually, since diets are most often temporary. Weight loss is most effective when approached from a lifestyle mindset and trying to live a healthier, happier life.
Well, I knew that.
That is
and
true.
I preach that every day. When you go on a diet, the minute you go off and you go back to your old habits, not only do you gain that weight back, but you tend to gain more weight.
We don't like that. We don't like that.
So it's about changing habits, and habits have to be changed gradually. If you go into changing lifestyle habits all at once and being very rigorous and strict with yourself, you'll last about a week or two, and then you'll be right back to where you started. So gradual changes, slow changes.
And things that actually make you feel good, because that reward system starts to kick in. Like if you exercise and you feel better after exercising for some time, you'll probably continue to exercise.
Exactly.
So, next question, how can cannabis help people gain weight?
Well, that's an easy one. Actually, THC is FDA approved in the form of a pharmaceutical, of course, but it's the same THC molecule. And it is FDA approved to treat cachexia, which is wasting or being too thin in patients with HIV/AIDS. So THC has the opposite effect on appetite as CBD. It stimulates the appetite. And as I said, those little rats were in the potato chip bowl, so it tends to increase the desire for foods that are higher in fat, and it helps
You're
patients.
making me want to eat potato chips. So another audience question. So what role does the endocannabinoid system play in the body's metabolic process?
That's a very complicated question.
That's why I'm giving it to you.
Yeah, we don't have a couple of hours to go into detail on that. But what I can say, the Cliff Notes, the abridged version is that cannabis does influence glucose metabolism and fat metabolism, so it helps our bodies process those substances more efficiently, and they're less likely to be stored as fat. Also, stress in particular affects how our bodies handle calories. And when people are stressed, it's very difficult for them to lose weight. Often people will gain weight because that signal from the hypothalamus to the pituitary down to the adrenal glands, which sit on top of our kidneys, those adrenal glands secrete hormones that shift how we metabolize calories.
We just hold on to it.
We hold on. Almost everything goes right to fat.
Right. It's like my dog. I give her a cup of food and she's still fat as a house. She must be very stressed out.
Maybe.
All right, we're going to move straight into an audience question. So when I consume cannabis, I literally get the instant munchies. Am I doing something wrong? I would like it to not affect me in this way.
All right, well, that's a function of THC. Mm-hmm. So THC and CBD are kind of polar opposites when it comes to appetite. CBD is an appetite suppressant. THC is an appetite stimulant. So consuming THC without any CBD on board, for many people it's going to increase your appetite, and it's going to increase your appetite for foods that are rich in fat for some reason.
So that's really interesting. We're talking about THC, which is a cannabinoid, but then there's also some strains of cannabis that have THCV, a different cannabinoid, which is known to actually suppress appetite. Do you know much about that?
Well, I know maybe not a whole lot about it, but that THCV is an appetite suppressant. And some of the processors are trying to pull that out of the plant to use it as an appetite suppressant. Just one big problem. THCV is more intoxicating than THC. Mm. So if you have a lifestyle where you can be impaired throughout the day, then you could use THCV to suppress your appetite. Or if you like being stoned but you're watching your weight, you might choose THCV over THC. But as an appetite suppressant for wellness, I don't think it's a hot contender.
Well, maybe one solution would be to switch from THC to a 1-to-1 CBD and THC. That might mitigate a little bit of the...
That will mitigate the appetite, but for some people who use that euphoric high as a respite, we have patients with chronic and debilitating illnesses that enjoy that kind of being out of themselves for a bit. It kind of takes them away, helps them to forget. It can be very enjoyable, and we like for them to experience that from time to time. We don't like for our teenagers to be using that all day long and being in a euphoric high, but for adults who have very stressful jobs and that is a way of relaxing, or for patients with serious illnesses, it can be quite a benefit. And if they're worried about their weight, then maybe that THCV might be the answer.
Great, well that's good to hear. And I just want to remind everyone in the audience that if you have questions about cannabis and weight management, please use our live chat and ask your questions there, and one of our HelloMD doctors will answer. So the next question for you, what role does the gut microbiome play in weight loss, and how does cannabis fit into this?
These questions, okay, they're very complicated processes that we're talking about.
We're testing you.
Well, you are. And the gut microbiome is something that's really we're just really starting to understand. We know that there's an enteric nervous system, and this is a connection between the brain and the gut, and it is influenced by the type of bacteria that are in the intestines. And these bacteria all have their own neurotransmitter systems going on, many of them that we don't understand or know exactly how they work. But the cannabis influencing the microbiome, I'm not so sure is as important as how the diet affects the microbiome. If we look at patients or people who have mostly a high plant-based diet, they tend to have a better ratio of what we call, this is not a judgment, but good bacteria to bad bacteria. No offense, bad bacteria. And we see the flip side with people who have diets high in animal protein and in fat. So it is all very intricate. It's interlaced. These components influence each other in ways that we really don't fully understand. But one thing is that when THC does increase the appetite, it does tend to increase the desire for fat. I don't know that that is something that's beneficial to the microbiome or not, but we have a lot more to study in this area.
Well, it goes back to the you are what you eat, right?
It is, and two, a lot of these studies are done on mice. And so we don't have the human data where we can just come out and say that if you do this, we can fix that. But we do know that the bacterial colonization in the intestines is extremely important. It's so important to the point that we are starting to do fecal transplants in patients with difficult to treat inflammatory bowel disease. Yeah. So these bacteria influence the inflammatory response. They influence how tightly these epithelial cells in the gut are together and how they keep these tight junctions, which keeps things out of the body that can stimulate the immune system. It's a very interesting question, and I just don't know all the answers.
That's very disappointing.
I'm sorry.
Okay, are you ready for our next fact?
Yes.
Okay, so did you know the prevalence of obesity is lower in marijuana consumers than non-consumers, as identified in a 2011 study? Is that true?
It is true that that cannabis users tend to have significantly lower body fat percentages than people who don't use cannabis. And I don't know how they eat all those potato chips and still keep the fat off.
Well, it's counterintuitive, isn't that? I mean,
yes.
it's just that people always think that people who consume cannabis are just sitting around eating chips and junk food, but if that's true, then there's something to it.
Yeah.
All right, so last time I'm going to remind the audience, if you have any questions, please use the live chat and one of our Hello MD doctors will answer the question. So, final question for you today, Dr. Frye. What's the best way to take CBD for weight loss or maintenance? How often? What type of product? And do you recommend finding products with a trace amount of THCV, as we talked about before?
Okay, well, CBD is my cannabinoid of choice for weight loss, so I recommend using a tincture or some other form that can be used under the tongue or that will be absorbed through the blood vessels that are in the mouth. When you swallow a product that you have started sublingually, it is absorbed through the intestines, and that delays everything and keeps it working a lot longer. So for patients who want to use CBD to help with appetite, they can take a dose in the morning and then maybe again in the mid to late afternoon if they need it. I recommend using it daily for 2 or 3 months. In addition, I put a heavy emphasis on looking at getting those processed foods, those junk foods out of the diet and getting up and moving.
And the types of products that you most often recommend?
I most often recommend tinctures, which are they can be oil-based or alcohol-based. The oil-based can go directly under the tongue. The alcohol-based tinctures, which is the traditional way of making a tincture, and a tincture is just a medicine that's made by soaking a plant in alcohol and extracting those active compounds. Those are too harsh to go under the tongue, so I have patients put them in a little water, swish it around the mouth a little bit, and then swallow. And I didn't address the THCV. The THCV is for my patients who would like to get a little stoned and are still watching their weight, but for people working during the day, having to drive, having to sign contracts and make important decisions and looking professional, we can't use THCV. It would have to be CBD.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you so much for everything today. I feel like I've learned so much as usual, and I hope that you have too. If you have any further questions, please feel free to post them in the live chat, and our HelloMD doctors will continue to answer your questions. And that's a wrap, and thank you for watching. And tune in for our next Ask a Doctor series, which will probably be the following week or next week.
All right.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.